Hi, welcome to Grief to Gratitude, a podcast dedicated to helping others who are going through hard times or who have been through things that seem impossible to overcome, but God has helped them get through it. I want to introduce my two guests today, special guests, because they are my nieces. This is Tammy Brush
Hi.
and Kim Melton,
Hello.
and we're more like sisters, I just want to say.
It's true.
True.
Always has been.
Yep.
Um, my sister Linda is their mother, and we'll tell you all about Linda later. But Linda was a little bit older than me, so Kim and Tammy and I grew up together more than I grew up with Linda, and so it's been quite a journey to go through this with them, and in the role of myself also suffering loss because of the family connection. So I just want to start out today, and who wants to begin telling just a little bit about yourselves? Tammy?
Well, my name's Tammy Brush, and I have a sister, Kim, who's much older than me.
No, that's not true.
And
This is a
we
religious show.
have a brother who is 10 years younger than us. And we were raised mostly by our mom. So we were very, very close with each other. And we are quite a team. And I'm married, and I have a son and a daughter and 3 grandchildren, 2 grandsons and a granddaughter.
Woo.
And I am Kim Melton, and I am Tammy's much younger sister.
Not true.
Uh, actually, I'm 2 years older than Tammy. I'm just the first
2
grandchild.
long years.
No. And I work full time, and I have a son that is 28 and a daughter that is 23 and 1 grandchild.
Beautiful grandchildren they have. I'm surprised.
And we have great daughter-in-laws too.
Absolutely.
Boy, the Lord
As
bless
do
us.
I.
Lord bless us with those.
Me too. We're blessed. I've never even told them about me, but that's for another day.
That's
So,
going to be a good one. You don't want to miss that one.
so Tammy, kind of describe a little bit about Joe. Tell us about your brother.
Okay, well, like I said, he was 10 years younger than us, and he was a super sweet baby. We just kind of, because of our ages when he was born, we just kind of mothered him too. He always said he really had 3 mothers because Kim and I mothered him so much. And then, but he struggled with some issues when he was young, and it led to a long life of substance abuse. He had some mental illness associated with that. I don't know that we ever got a really good diagnosis for him. I think he was diagnosed with everything at different times, don't you?
Yes. Personality disorder.
Personality disorder, yep. So even though we loved him, he tried to commit suicide the first time when he was 8 years old by taking too many pills that he found. And then that's when we kind of were really more aware that he was struggling. He struggled with obesity from a very young age. And I think he started doing drugs when he was probably about 12 or 13.
He was 12.
12, yep. And so that just took us on a roller coaster ride. He was very aggressive and could be a bit on the abusive side. And being a large man, in addition to that, that could be a little bit scary. And so we had a lot of years of having to feel like we had to really protect mom. But she was his biggest advocate for sure.
Yes, she was.
She
But
loved
also-
him so much.
his biggest enabler as well.
Oh yes, very much so.
That
Very
is-
I
much
think that's
so.
very common in
Yeah,
that
it
type
is.
of
Yes.
situation, though.
It is when you have a child who is dealing with things like that, and they call and they don't have money for food or a place to stay or a vehicle.
Yes.
Parents want to rush to the rescue, really.
Yeah.
Especially when it's a big
How can you
issue
not
like
want
that.
to? Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
But they many times take what you give them to help them out of that situation and buy drugs.
Right.
or alcohol.
And he was, we always say he was the smartest of all of us because somehow he managed to hardly ever work and still survive. He was definitely a survivalist, so he would call um, and get money from whoever, whenever, or even when we would kind of help control that on our end as much as we could. He always found a way to turn up or get out of rehab too soon, or because he was in and out of some rehab facilities, in and out of shelters,
Yeah.
things like that, as he became an adult, obviously.
Yeah.
And so that was a hard struggle for him. Yeah.
And for her,
Yes.
because, well, as a mother, you want to, take everything you've got to make your kids okay.
Right.
But no matter how much she gave, and I'm not just talking about financially, but emotionally and in prayer and all the things that she did physically to help him, it was never enough. She could, and that frustrated her
Yes.
because, she wanted him to be okay.
Well, and really what finally ended up happening was because of my mom's health becoming very poor, she was really unable to emotionally or mentally be part of that. So we actually had a spell of about a year or two where we really detached them from each other. We blocked his number on her phone. She wanted us to do that. Not really wanted, but needed us to do that. And we told her we would take care of, we would take care of him as good as we could, but we wouldn't enable him. And we got the counseling that we needed from other therapists that he'd worked with. And they said when he would call, to only say you would give him money for an Uber, that you would call and set up to get him to a hospital or a rehab facility. That was the only help that you would provide. And it was a lot of screaming and yelling and threatening and stuff like that. But that every time he would call, I could tell within 10 seconds if he was using or not. Because he used really hard drugs. And I would just say, have my brother call me back when you're done with him, because I felt like I was talking to a demon. I could tell by the tone of his voice. I could tell almost immediately that it wasn't my brother calling. It was the drugs. And so, when he would call me sober, we could talk. But eventually he did take us up on getting him into another facility. And then that was what really led him to rehabilitation. But he was 38.
Yeah.
Right? 38 years old. So that was a long, long road for my mom. And then as he got better, he got clean and sober that time. And he was there for a while. What program was that, Kim? It was a good program.
But it was a great program. And it really turned him around.
It did.
And he really wanted to do better and
Yes.
had started to do better.
Yes.
And was making a life for himself. And Mom had been able to see him again, and he was calling and checking on her, and her health was deteriorating during that time too.
Right.
But they really were able to rekindle at the end, and we're very close, and we were close with him at the end. We spoke to him on the day that he died. Tammy talked to him in person that day.
No, it was on the phone.
Well, that's right. You talked to him on the phone. I texted him back and forth.
And I left him a message on his voicemail, and unfortunately, he didn't get to call me back on that.
Well, one thing we didn't say yet, ladies, is that he passed away on his birthday.
On his birthday.
On his 40th, 41st.
Oh,
Oh, it's
42nd.
I thought 42nd.
It was his 42nd birthday.
That's right. Oh gosh, I'm old.
So he died on his
42nd
42nd birthday.
He did, and unfortunately, Linda was in the rehab facility at the time because of health issues, not drug rehab, but health issues. She had severe COPD and was having some heart difficulties. And we were going to be bringing her home in a few days. And, but, so she was there, and Joe had a tragic motorcycle accident. And it took his life.
Heading to a surprise party. When he had gotten out of the facility he was in then, he became part of a motorcycle club. And they really took him in as a brotherhood. The president of the club housed him in a home in the back of his property. And he lived there for about a year. But one of the rules from the club was that they not do drugs. And so that had really been a partnership for him, and he was really happy for the first time
Mhm.
that I'd
For
ever
the
known
first
him
time ever.
in his life, and he thanked us for protecting Mom from him and for taking care of her. So we were really healing our relationship for sure.
He had gotten a more clear perspective on life,
Yes. Oh.
and I think spiritually
Mhm.
he was growing,
Mhm.
and so he finally was on a good path,
Mhm.
and so he had his accident, and we had to go and tell Linda.
Yep.
Yes.
And that's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I know you
The
girls.
hardest thing.
It was the
Hopefully
hardest.
the hardest thing I'll
Probably
ever
the
have to do.
hardest.
It was the hardest day of my life.
Yep.
But you know, God orders the steps, and God has a
Yep.
plan and timing, and we didn't know then because it was just tragic that it was
Right.
Joe, and we thought, you know, why would God take him right at that moment when he was at the best time of his life and was making strides and was doing so much better, and we were being able to rekindle that relationship. But 3 weeks later, we found out why, and that was because then Mother died. And we knew that if the order had been different and Mother had died first, then Joe could never have handled that, and that would have put him on such a terrible backtrack road. He had moved during that time period right before he died and was living in an area that wasn't quite as good, and he was doing well, but he was struggling. And the devil was after him, and he was after him fervently, and he was having dreams and things, and I think that's why God took him first, because he knew that if Mother had gone first, then what road he would have probably chosen.
Well, her love was so big for him. One thing she said, of course, it was not in the first few days. It was a couple of weeks after, but she said that that she knew it was God's order, because she would rather have gone through the pain of losing him than for him to have to go through the pain of losing her, because she would never want him to have had to experience that because they were so close.
And she always said as well that she wanted to live long enough to see Joe well.
Yep.
And that she would always be his biggest advocate.
Oh yeah. She was always concerned that if he relapsed in things, that no one would provide and take care of him the way that she would.
So she definitely did not want to pass.
Because she was the
after
Energizer
him.
Bunny. She totally should not have been alive
No.
until she passed away. The doctors were amazed by her because she cheated death's door so many times. She was a very strong woman and full of life and laughter, but she was a terrible patient.
Yeah, she was.
Terrible. But
Terrible.
she was full of life up until the very end.
Let's
Yeah.
show them their pictures real quick. And
Well, this was
Mama.
Linda, my sister. Do I look like her?
You do,
You
actually.
do.
You do.
So that's my sweet sister. Well, sweet most of the time, but she had a
She was
temper.
on
it. Oh, yeah.
Had- See, and this is Joe here.
He's our brother.
And so this was just 3 weeks apart. So I want to talk about how God gave God hugs during this time, because there
Yeah.
were certainly a lot of things that happened that when you look back, you can see that God had you through all of this.
Yes.
But as sisters to having one who passes, and then 3 weeks later a mother passes, that was tremendous. I mean, it was hard for me because it's my sister and my nephew, but I can't even imagine what you guys felt, and share a little bit with that and how God helped you and gave you. We were talking about we call them God hugs,
So amazing.
God winks.
God winks.
Yeah, and he does. He's just there, and you just don't always even recognize that that's what it is. But Tammy and I, right after Joe passed away, I had a business trip to go on, and so God gave us that time to be together, Tammy and I, and the day that Joe died, the very next day, my aunt had already made plans, my other aunt, other than Debbie, their other sister, to come to town and visit Mom. And so it just worked out perfectly that her other sister was going to be there already, for Tammy and I to go out of town together.
Yep.
And we had made plans for Mom to come home the next day. So we were actually at Mom's house. Debbie and I were at Mom's house getting everything ready for her to come home when Joe passed away. So otherwise she could not have come home. We could not have brought her home because she had to have oxygen and a hospital bed, and there were a lot of medical things that she had to have to come home.
Right.
That God orchestrated it all being there the day before, because He knew that she would need all of that to be there the day before, even though we didn't know that at the time.
So we were actually able to go to the assisted living place, or I guess the whatever, it was a rehab, and go there together and tell her. And we had already told the facility that we were on our way and what had happened, for them to get her things, her meds and stuff ready, and her discharge paper, because we knew we couldn't leave her there. We would need to bring her and have her be with us. And so that really worked out perfectly, because I really believe if we had left her there or left her even alone at home, she probably would have just turned her oxygen off at that point. But
I mean, I also believe that closed the door for her. And she did have a lot of pain and suffering.
yes, she did.
And she endured a lot. And
She had
so,
fallen and broken her back and her hip,
yeah.
and that kind of led to a lot of other health issues after that. Yeah.
So she had peace then, that she could, I think she was ready to go. And the Lord's going to take us when He says. We don't have control over that unless there's suicide involved. But so she just really, that the time between them, my sister got in, Marcia, my sister Cindy got there from Michigan, my brother Mark and his wife Marie, and Cindy's husband Jeff. And Jeff wasn't able to come because of work.
Not to that.
Yeah, not to that one.
And Mark and Marie from Florida got there. So Linda was just blown away by the support that she had from her family, and also from the community, because she's lived in this area for more years than anywhere else. And Kim's church just came through in an amazing way. Church at Cahaba Bend.
Church at Cahaba Bend. I go to a fairly small church.
Yeah.
And everyone knows, it's like everyone knows your name there. And they were there immediately with food, and they let us have the service there for Joe.
And just to explain a little bit about that, when you're part of a motorcycle club, we learned really quickly, because his brothers from his motorcycle club were at the hospital when he passed, and his best friend was able to go in and see him after he had passed and collect his items. They took care of everything. I mean, they paid for the cremation. They brought his ashes to us. They cleaned out his apartment. They just took care of everything, and said whatever our family needed, they would be there. And then they had a huge showing for the funeral. I bet we had over 100 bikers at least.
Yeah, on a rainy day.
On
and
a
they
rainy
came
day.
From Georgia.
And Illinois.
And
Florida.
And I mean,
7 states.
seven
different
states. And they just packed out that church, and they had their own type of ceremonies. We have people that stand guard by the ashes, and they spoke, and to hear the stories of how the life that Joe had been able to live that year, and the bonds and the friends and brothers that he had made, was really encouraging. And then it was an opportunity for us, because we didn't know most of those people, and the Lord put a beautiful message of hope on Kim's heart, and she was able to speak, and we presented the salvation message to them and offered them the love of our family to them. And it was really it was a hard funeral. I was actually surprised. We didn't think Mom would be able to go because of her health, but she went, and the Lord gave her the strength. She didn't even medicate when she went. She wanted to be alert and aware, and she was able to hold it together. She spoke at the funeral, which shocked all of us. And now, she was a hot mess after the funeral, I can tell you that. But she made it through the funeral like a champion, and she said it was only by the strength of the Lord. And we're still connected with some of those some of his friends. They check on us and stuff. So
Yeah,
that was a
was
blessing.
great. Tell us about the God hug that you received with the message that Joe's best friend got from a friend he went to school with.
Well, when I wasn't sure about my brother's salvation at our church, I go to Church of the Highlands, and they give you these little lifesavers, and you're supposed to keep them so you remember to pray for people in your family that are unsaved. And it's just I've had Joe's for 12 years, as long as I've been at Church of the Highlands, and kept it and prayed. And Mom would always say, every time Joe would do good for a little while, she'd say, well, did you eat your lifesaver? He's doing good. And I'm like, no, let's give it time, Mom. Let's give it time. I'm just thinking maybe he's not quite there yet. He's not really showing that he's surrendered his life to the Lord. And so the night that he passed, I got a Facebook message from someone that I didn't know. And she said, I just want you to know that your brother was with the Lord and that the Lord had been calling him for the last week. He had been having spiritual dreams. And they found out, I think by the next day, that the first person on site after his wreck went to high school with one of his brothers from the motorcycle club and contacted him and said, because he had his jacket on, of course, his motorcycle club jacket. And he got to Joe first, and he said, what can I do for you? Because it was a compound fracture. It was really bad. And he said, just pray for me and pray with me. And so she said, I believe that he accepted the Lord as his Savior and surrendered his life at that time, obviously probably knowing that he was in really bad shape. And she said the presence of the Lord was strong there.
Sure.
And Jimmy told him about my weird visitation after.
I think so.
Okay, because, it's a podcast, so y'all can think I'm weird or not. I know that the Lord is with us and that he's close. I told Deb one of the things that changed in my faith was kind of always, I believed in God, I surrendered to God when I was young, and I've lived a life of faith. But I always kind of felt like God was a little far away, maybe up in the clouds in heaven or whatever. But through this experience, I just was able to experience him really present with me. And even to where he had placed in a small group just the semester before they passed, so the fall before they passed, all of us in a small group called Freedom with Mom. And one of the leaders of that group had a son that was murdered. And so she had gone through the death of a son. She says, don't say they're lost, because she knows where he is. He's not lost. And so immediately we were able to contact her. She came and said, lean in to the Lord, because he will do miraculous things. God hugs for you, and you don't want to miss him. Through your grief, God will be very present with you if you will watch for him. So we had many of those through the time.
We did.
But one of them was Mom just wasn't sure about whether Joe was saved or not. So we had that confirmation email come through saying that this is what had happened that night. And then when we were on our conference together, I was asleep in the bed, and Kim had already gone to her meetings, and my brother was a very large man. So his hands were huge, like 3 times what a normal finger would be. And I was sound asleep, and I sleep kind of like this on my side, and I felt his hand move my hand. And I don't know if it was the Lord just using his presence, because I don't know how I would feel about all that. But it was definitely him waking me up. And I said, I just kind of was awake. And he said, I just want to tell you I'm sorry. And I said, I'm sorry you had such a tortured life. And I said, I love you. And he was with Jesus in that moment. And so I came back from that trip, and I just had a peace about it. So I told Mom, we took my lifesaver to her, and I said, I'm going to eat my lifesaver. I know that Joe's with the Lord. And I told her what had happened. And she said, I've been praying for Joe to visit me. Why did he visit you? And I said, because nobody would have believed you. But they know I didn't want him to visit me. I was just sleeping in my hotel room. And so, I'm telling you the truth, because you were praying for it. So that was a God hug.
That was a God hug.
It was.
It
As
was.
soon as I came back from my meeting, Timmy's like, you're never going to believe
Not going to believe who I had breakfast with.
who talked to me this morning.
Well, so
Yeah.
tell us a story about, real quick, about the urns.
Oh, good grief. You want to tell that one, since I just told that other long one?
It doesn't matter.
So many funny things.
We did have a lot of funny things. So Joe, of course, was in this motorcycle club, and we wanted to do something. The club was so great, and we knew that he would want something like that. So his other stepsister half sister,
Mm-hmm.
was sweet and said what could she do, and so she was going to order his urn for us, and so she ordered an urn, and it was beautiful. It had a motorcycle on it, and Tammy's husband had delivered to Tammy's house.
Yep.
And he opened it up. When they opened it up, it was supposed to say loving son and brother. And when he opened it up, it said loving son and bother.
Perfection.
Well, Tammy and I had no problem with that.
I say leave it. I say leave it just like it is.
We thought it was funny. We just thought it was another little, another little thing that Joe did. And so, but
Perfect.
Mother was not going to have that.
No.
She was not having that on his urn. So we contacted the company, and
Actually, we talked to
Nita,
yeah, and she was like, "Oh my goodness, yeah."
so she took care of it. Nita did, and so another box came in the mail. And when the second box came into the mail and we opened it, it also said,
My husband opened it again. We weren't there. We were at Mom's. Yeah,
and it said loving son and bother again.
sure did.
Anybody need an urn?
So we were like, well, great, another one. So we said, this really is supposed to be. So it was just a funny in a time that was stressful.
Yes.
That you just needed a laugh.
Yeah.
Yes.
And God sent us something to make us laugh.
Yeah.
So we once again, Nita also contacted the company, I believe, again, and said, look, there's a problem here. So
This is what I ordered.
the third urn came in,
Yes.
and Chip once again received the urn
Yes.
and opened it.
He called. He said, "I'm scared to open it."
But he did,
Open
and it was correct. And it said loving son and brother.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
so that is the urn that we used for Joe
Yes.
at the funeral, and it was beautiful. Little did we know that 3 weeks later we were going to need another urn.
Yes.
So not only did God provide laughter
Yep.
for us in the interim of all of this, He provided us with enough urns for everyone.
Yep.
And so
And a spare.
and a spare. So
Yes.
we used the loving son and bother urn
Yes.
for Mother's ashes.
Yes, we did.
So now Mom is in the loving son and bother urn.
Yes.
And the motorcycle club, we gifted the third urn to the
Oh, did you?
motorcycle club
Yes, we did.
so that they could use it to hold their cigarette ashes on the
Yes.
bar.
Because Joe apparently was terrible about actually using an ashtray, and he would leave ashes all over the bar. So they thought that would be a perfect tribute to him.
Because it's still holding ashes.
It is still holding
And
ashes.
just a different kind. So during that time, when Kim and Tammy were able to get away, like I said, my family, our family, had come in
Yes,
from the
thank you,
different
Lord.
states. So the sisters stayed, and we took care of Linda, and we played cards, and we, my sister Cindy, Linda always wanted to go to Maine because she loves lobster.
Obsessed with lobster.
Yeah. So, of course, not knowing Linda was going to pass, it was like she had her last dinner, you know. And so Cindy went and purchased lobsters. First, Marcia went and purchased her some lobster bisque and a lobster po' boy. And that was good, but she still wasn't completely satisfied. So Cindy went and got all four of us girls lobsters, and Cindy and I prepared this beautiful meal. And Linda was just in lobster heaven. She got all she wanted. But the reason I tell that story is because that was a God hug.
That was a God.
That was something that ministered to her.
Yep.
And something that
And she loved being with her sisters and having her daughters gone because we were always the ones nagging at her,
Yeah.
saying
We
no
wouldn't let her have
Diet Coke,
it.
no butter, no. We were trying
No
to keep her on these
mayonnaise.
diets that the doctors wanted her on, and the
No
sisters were like,
Sonic.
"Let her have what she wants." So she was thrilled.
that was fun.
Well,
That
it was just a
good
great
time.
week it was a great
Yes.
respite for Tammy and I to be able to
Yes.
recuperate and try to get ourselves back together for what we thought would be
Yeah.
taking care of Mom
Right.
for a long period of time. Little
Yeah.
did we know it would be rejuvenating us so that then we could deal with another loss and another funeral.
So
Correct.
again, God provided that
Yes.
time for you and for
Yes.
us.
Yes.
To
And
have
for
that
Mom.
special for
Yes.
her,
Yeah.
to have that special time together.
Mm-hmm.
I know that our friend from Church of the Highlands, Tammy Bishop,
Yeah.
had been the one that came and ministered. Both churches played an integral part in the healing. So I just want to encourage you to have a church family.
Oh,
Be
yeah,
in a small
absolutely.
group.
Yes.
Be somewhere where when you have good things, they'll celebrate with you.
That's
Right.
right.
And when you have tragedies, they'll cry with you.
That's right.
They'll pray with you. They'll be there.
Yes.
It's just a community. And yes, I've heard some church stories that weren't that good.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in that place, find a place that will take care
Well,
of
and
you.
having friends and having
Friends.
that won't make me cry, but having friends that all you have to do is say the word. A friend of mine sent me a message and said, all you have to do is say the word when you need me to come. And all I typed back 20, 30 minutes before Mom died was word. And she showed up with no shoes
Yeah.
because she got in her car so fast to get to me so quickly that she didn't even bother to put her shoes on because she knew that if I said word, she needed to be there. And then my pastor's wife and they were there right as soon as Mom died.
Yeah.
So just having friends that you can call on. I had other friends praying, and y'all did too.
Yeah,
They're
we
all
had
of your close friends.
friends when Joe passed just said don't even, because we knew we'd have a lot of people coming in. We had a lot of, with the motorcycle club and stuff too, and so they just said don't even worry about the after funeral thing. We've got that all taken care of. You don't even have to ask
Right.
what we're serving. It will all be done. I don't even remember what we had. They set it up. They
I don't even
did-
remember where we did it.
We did it.
It was at my house, but they just
Oh.
completely came in and ran the whole thing. We said it was so wonderful. One thing I had not thought of before is we had some friends bring toilet paper, Kleenex, paper products,
Yeah.
paper
paper plates,
plates,
and forks,
plates before, and just not having to worry with thinking about those things. And it was enough to even take us through both funerals, not knowing that we were literally going to have another one so far, so close to the first one. And two, they were such separate type funerals. Joe's
Right.
was
That's what I wanted us to talk about a little bit was the differences in the funerals, because I think some people think that a funeral has to be
yeah.
a certain thing, or a celebration of life has to be a certain way. You have to come in, you have to sing 3 hymns, have the message,
Yeah.
read the family.
the obituary.
Yeah,
Right.
read the obituary.
No.
I mean, and I think every funeral, I just went to one last week that was so special. But I think every funeral has to be what that person,
A reflection
of
of that
that
person.
person's life.
Sure.
So why don't you tell a little bit about the differences in the funeral to me?
Well, I feel like for Joe's, it was more an opportunity. My grandmother had always said that Joe was going to be a preacher one day, and I feel like that was kind of his final outing, was to share the message of the hope that's only found in a relationship with God. He did not live his life in a relationship with God. That's not his story. But I believe that the prayers of people and generations of prayers for him, he knew the message of salvation.
Yes, he did.
He just struggled with a lot of demons. And so he just didn't feel himself worthy to be saved by God. He told me many times he was in another motorcycle club when he was younger that was a horrible club, and they did really, really horrible things. And he said, if you knew the things I've done in my life, you would not even think that God would ever want to save me or want me to be with him for eternity. I mean, he did not feel himself worthy, and he didn't really understand that no one's worthy, not one person.
Right.
We're all sinners in the eyes of God, and none of us deserve to be rescued from the penalty of sin. And we've all sinned, all of us. And so he didn't understand that until the very end, and I think that's when the Lord really was able to open his eyes to that. And so for us, we felt like it was the Lord giving us an opportunity to share that message of hope to a lot of people. It was a big funeral. It was probably 200 at least, do you
big.
think?
Or
Or more, 250
Yeah.
people. It was a big funeral. Lots
Which
of
you
people
would not
came.
have expected.
No.
No.
Because
He
he's
would
coming
not
back
have.
to
He had
his
burned so many
hometown.
bridges.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
there were just a handful of people that were friends from before
Right.
that came in.
Right.
Right.
And so, yeah, it was a total opportunity
Right.
because
Yes.
of Joe for people to
Yes.
hear salvation message
Yes.
and to just see the love of a family.
Yes.
And of how
Yeah.
that works, and we saw the support of this club.
Yes.
Now, I just want to say, this was I don't know how, I don't want to get on any weird territory, but this was a club that wasn't involved in things that
Right. They were
Crime.
not.
Yeah,
They did not do drugs. They are a good they are a good club, and there are
Not a
very
Christian
good-
club, but somewhere
Right.
in there were Christians.
Right.
So
But
for sure.
you know, they were
believers.
comrades. They
Yeah,
were
were.
brothers, as they
were good.
refer to each other. And their whole thing was that they supported each other and helped each other if they were struggling.
Right.
Yep.
If they were, you know, I mean, it wasn't just
Right. That's
the memorial service that they helped with, and which they did so much, but. They were almost like a support group, like
Oh,
a small
yes.
group, you know,
They were.
for
Oh, yeah.
each other in,
Yeah,
in all
they're
times.
family. They're family.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they are.
so
We
I'm
still
sad.
consider many of them to be
Yes,
family
yes,
to
we
us
do.
now.
As a matter of fact, they did a big thing even after our funeral. It was about a month or
About a
two
month
later,
later.
a month later, where they had a huge celebration of life for Joe at their clubhouse. And so we traveled over there. They invited us to come, and so we traveled over there.
Yes.
They had a big cookout. They had this big revving of the motorcycles, moment of silence.
Amazing.
They have a ceremony where they take their cut, like their jacket, and they have different things that they can put in a shadow box. Some of them will like cut their name thing off of theirs and put it in there, right? I'm saying correctly. And so it's just this sign of commitment. And then they hang the shadow box in the clubhouse as a memorial to them. And one of the God hugs that we had was Mom, of course, was determined that she
When
was
she was
going to
alive.
go to that. And we were like, Mom, there's no way that we can take you. I mean, she's already had, hospice coming in and out, and we had oxygen and all kinds of equipment. And she said she was going to go. And so then, of course, when she passed, we all said, well, we're going to take her. We're going to take her ashes. And so I'll see if you can see this, but this is a picture I keep in my purse just to remind me about God hugs. And it's a picture of the bar at the clubhouse, and it's got Mom's ashes in the bother urn, and Joe's ashes in the brother urn, and then his cut with all the stuff that they put in it that they hung up for him. And so that was pretty cool.
That was really neat.
It was it was a very interesting thing. It was
Yes.
very special for them to
Yes.
do it. But with Joe's funeral, we had it set up
Yes.
like regular church services.
Yes.
And it was full. We had to do that.
Yeah.
It was completely full, and the motorcycle club would. What I thought they would come up and put down a bead for anybody. I think anybody that he had done something nice for,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
they would put a bead, and he had all of these beads, and it went in his shadow box.
Right.
And we went in before the service, and we prayed over every single chair
Yes.
in the church, because we knew that there would be some unchurched people that would come, and we just wanted Joe's life to mean something and for good to come out of his death. And so
They've
that
never
was a
experienced the
very-
presence of the Lord.
Right.
We wanted them to experience the presence of the Lord.
It was just a very different
Yep.
service. For Mom's service, just 3 weeks later, several of the same people, of course, the motorcycle club didn't come, but they didn't even know, I don't think, that she had died, because when we got to the other service, some of them had asked us.
Some of them
Some
knew, but
knew.
some did not. Yeah.
But we put Mom's service at the same church in the same room,
Yep.
but we did everything in a semicircle so that we could all be facing one another, and we told stories. We let people get up, and really it was more of a conversation type service where people got up and spoke about Mom and
It was beautiful.
and
The
talked
music
about
that she liked,
Right,
the
yeah.
more upbeat
More-
tempo, bluegrassy type music that she liked, and
Right.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
it was just a total different feel of a funeral. So
Yeah.
I
So
would just encourage you to have whatever kind of funeral
Yeah,
for your family
absolutely.
member.
Yeah.
You don't have to have it. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be.
no,
No rules.
Yeah,
That's
there's no
right.
rules.
I think that's how it is now. People can
Yep.
celebrate the life of their loved one in any way they want, and
Right.
it's okay. So we just have a few minutes left.
Yeah.
How did you guys? How have you recovered? Okay, that was a little over a year ago.
A
1
year and a
year?
half.
January 7th of 2022.
And January
was-
31st.
Uh-huh.
was Mom.
And so, what has happened in your life since, as far as recovering and grieving, and how you've dealt with the grief of that?
Well, we have clung to each other.
We do a
We
turtle.
yeah,
the turtle.
I'm gonna tell them that.
I know I get jealous
I'm a
because
turtle.
I'm
We just cuddle together. Turtle, turtle, turtle.
We're very close. We always have been very close.
Yes.
But this has brought us probably even closer. And we both have leaned heavily on
You leaned in, didn't you?
We did. We
What was
leaned
it
in.
Tammy
We
said?
leaned in.
Instead of pulling back,
Lean
Lean
in.
in.
lean into the Lord,
Yep.
to the support of your family and friends, and receive that, because that will help heal your soul.
Well, Scripture tells us that our Creator God is closer than a brother, and so He's everything that we need, and that He will never leave us or forsake us. He says that blessed are those who mourn.
For they shall
And
be
I've
comforted.
had other friends that have had losses. We've had other losses that we've walked through with other people, and I think some of the best advice I got was, when you feel like crying, cry.
Yeah.
It's okay. And it's weird because you think something's going to take your breath away and it doesn't. And then something strange. I messaged Kim this week because I was going to play Phase 10 and I hadn't pulled out my Phase 10 cards since the last time I played with Mom. So my last score thing was the score between me and Mom. It showed that she was winning, but I feel certain that I'm
think you
sure
were
I was
letting
letting
her.
her win because that did not look.
Don't listen to that.
I'm pretty sure of that.
I doubt it.
Yeah,
but
yeah, so little things like that where you just go, and then sometimes the tears just come, and you just have to let them come, and when they stop, and that's okay.
Those things are triggers, right? So recognize that
Yeah.
that there's going to be certain things
Sure.
that trigger you, and when that happens, like Tammy said, you just go with it because you might hear a song on the radio that's usually one of my big
Yes.
triggers,
That is
or like she said, a score sheet from your last game you played with
Yeah.
them, or it could be anything, but triggers in waves. Grief
Yeah.
comes in waves.
True.
And
It does.
you, like they said, you might be fine, and then the next thing you know, you're just falling apart.
Well, it's so strange because to me, with Joe's death, I was just going out on a date with my husband that night. It's Joe's birthday. I know he's going to the birthday party. I've talked to him for a very long time that day. He's super excited. And then I'm getting a call and he's in a motorcycle wreck. So then I'm through all those emotions of, oh my goodness, that it's serious. Talking with the hospital, but I'm still thinking, okay, he's going to recover from this. And then, but probably we're going to have to bring him back here. He's going to have a long recovery. What is this going to mean for, drug issues and things like that? And I'm processing that. And we get to the restaurant and I call to check in, really not ever even considering that he would die.
No, we
And when
weren't.
the doctor came on and told me that he had passed, it was just horrifying. I just was thinking that's not even possible. Chip had to take the phone. I was screaming so loud, I couldn't even have a conversation with them. And so, and then to have to go tell Mom, to me, it's almost like PTSD. That one was so much more traumatic.
Right.
That whole night and those
It was.
couple of weeks, just helping
was.
her get through that. And so with Mom, we
was
had
so
hospice
peaceful and
care.
beautiful.
We were all there with her. We had worship music playing. She was in her own home. We knew it was coming. We definitely knew within the last 24 hours that we were there. We were able to really pretty much keep her out of pain. We used a company called Expect Care for probably the last 2 years of her life. And if you are going through something with someone who has like COPD, congestive heart failure, any kind of terminal cancer, things like that, they are an amazing company. They are about quality of life. At first they said we can't get her to stay home long enough
They said
to
she's
get appointments
difficult.
with the nurses. But they would coordinate her care, send nurses to her house. They had bathers come help us. They had a pastor that would call and pray with her. They were wonderful. And then they helped us with the hospice and the final things, what to do. They came to the funeral.
Well, and that was just a God wink because
was
we
a
never
God wink.
thought that hospice would help you unless
No.
you were in your last few days.
We'd never heard of such a thing.
And I was at an elder justice thing that I'm involved in, and the Expect Care people spoke, and I went up to him after it was over with someone I knew, and she said, "We can help you."
Yeah.
And
well,
we
I
never
think
considered
hospice
it.
will do a year and then up to a year.
They
And
didn't
then
tell us
We
that.
were with their.
Well,
we were with them. They're a little bit different than your normal hospice care.
in Florida,
Yeah, they're a little
anyway,
bit
before
different.
when my mom and dad passed.
Because every time Mom would go in the hospital, they just took her out of it, and then we just redid her paperwork when she got back home again. We did that paperwork a lot.
Because they didn't know how long she would be in. And so,
Yeah, so
Kim,
your insurance changes with that.
what about you just dealing with the grief and how you cope now when those waves come and when...
Well, I mean, I do lean heavily on the Lord, and I pray about that a lot. But I also I won't forget them. I don't allow myself. I still, this gigantic picture of mom sits in my house,
Yeah.
in my, in my game room. I have their pictures hanging. I talk about them all the time. My granddaughter Harper has my mother's eyes, 100%.
Oh,
And
yeah.
every time Harper
Yeah.
looks in my little face and says, "I love you, Grandma," I almost feel like it's mom sometimes
Yeah.
because she has
It'll
those
make me
eyes.
cry.
And make me cry.
Yeah.
But I don't harbor on it, and I don't sit and think about them all the time. But I try to only have the good memories, and I haven't tried to mark them out of my life. And I think a lot of people take down all their pictures and put them away, and
Yeah.
because they don't want to have those memories. But I allow myself to continue to have them, and I lean on my friends.
So each
I'm in a great
person,
Bible study group,
Yeah.
and we talk about
yeah,
them
Like your grief
like
group.
they're almost
Yeah.
like they're
Talk about
alive.
you deal. Everybody
Yeah.
deals with grief differently, and I think like what you said, Kim, about there's no set way you have to have a
Right.
memorial service, a celebration of life, funeral, whatever it is that you want to call it or that you're having. That can be individual, and also your grieving
Yes.
is something that is very personal. Some people want people to talk to. Some people kind of back out, and something
There's no
also
wrong way.
No.
It's all right.
Something that Tammy Bishop told me, who was our leader in Freedom from Church of the Highlands. She said, let me say it right. She said, "You know God. God is with you, right?"
Yep.
And I'm like, "Yeah." And she said, "And Joe is with God,
Right.
right?
Yes. I
And
remember
Linda
this.
is with
Mhm.
God." So if Joe is with God and Linda is with God and God is with you, they're still with you.
That's right.
And I love that because it gave me comfort and peace to know that, they would live on through us, through not just genetically,
Right.
but through stories. And we have 10
Oh, yeah.
million. We could just
We could
do
do
a
this all
whole
day
yeah.
long
Oh,
if we
yes.
told all the stories.
But and there may be a day when I just have a show focused on telling stories. Different people
Yeah.
coming in, we'll just line them up and say,
Yeah.
There were
okay.
lots of stories at her funeral.
And
about
Oh, yeah.
yes, and people telling you about their God winks or
Yes.
hugs.
Mhm.
But
You'd have to rate that one probably
Yeah.
PG-13.
Well, and I love when Tammy Bishop, I know we talked about her a few times, but one of the things that has helped me a lot is that and we've talked about this already on this, is when she said that they're not lost.
right,
We haven't lost them. And so we know right where they are, and we know we're going to see them again. They're just, they just got there before we did.
Yeah.
And they're not lost.
no,
Lost is when you don't know where they are.
that's right.
Right.
And
And we
do.
have the peace that we know that they're with the Lord in heaven, but the alternate reality is I know a lot of people
Yeah,
lose
true.
people that are not believers, and I know this podcast will go to people like that, and that's a whole different show, Deb. It really is, and that's we have friends who have lost people who weren't believers, and we've had that in our own life, and that's a hard thing because the reality is if there's a heaven, then there's a hell, and I know there's a heaven. So I pray that anyone that's listening to this will seek out God outside of religion, outside of any church you've been in.
Right.
Get in the word of the Lord. I know there's a lot of attack on the Bible this generation right now, but the word speaks for itself. And if you will just find a Bible or get online, you can get online and read your Bible and just ask God. He will show up for you. He always shows up.
Any final words from you, Kim?
No, I just think that is very true.
We agree with you, Tim.
Yes, we do. I think
I
just
didn't
knowing the
write it.
Lord.
I just believe it.
Just knowing the Lord.
Come in
Knowing
for a
the
group
Lord.
hug,
Knowing
Kim.
the Lord.
Turtle
Group hug.
hug. Turtle.
In
It's
the
like
middle.
an Oreo.
I just want to encourage you to leave a comment. We'll read every comment. And if there's you have a prayer request, definitely put that on there. We've got prayer warriors that are amazing. If you haven't accepted the Lord, I would encourage you to believe that Jesus was real, the Son of God, that he died on the cross for our sins.
Yeah.
And that if we will accept that and ask him to forgive us, give your heart to him, he will save you.
And that there's no one that can't be saved.
That's right.
No one.
There's
No matter
no
what
matter
you've
what
done.
you've done. That Joe
And
is
we
the
have learned
example of that. Yeah.
Yep.
So click and subscribe. Be sure to do that. That encourages us and lets us know that you were there. And I just want to say I love you all, and I love you for watching. I love these girls.
Thank you for doing this, Aunt Debbie.
Oh,
They're my
love you.
girls.
I don't know what I would ever have done without them and my sisters and my friends and my brother, my sister-in-law. Anyway, I can't name everybody. My kids. Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, that's for another show. But we love you. God loves you. Bye for
Bye.
now. Bye. Mwah.